Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com for all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is episode 102, All Debts Paid, Season 3, Episode 3. Hello, hello, hello. Well, that was quite a packed episode. Indeed. I have lots of thoughts upon it with our characters that have showed up this week. Some we've met before and some new. All Debts Paid was written by Matthew B. Roberts, who also wrote the print shop episode. And it was directed by Brendan Maher. Wow. So exciting. I can't wait to get your feedback on this episode. It was quite surprising in some ways and blatantly in your face in a couple of ways. And it's also the last episode that we see Tobias Menzies. Oh, he's an excellent actor, and whatever you feel about Frank as a character, Tobias is amazing, and I think brought humanity and dimension to Frank, especially for the book readers. We only saw Claire's vantage point on him, and I know I don't talk about the books and the show together, but when we look at Frank, we actually saw him in 3 dimensions and saw from his point of view and what was going on in his mind. And I think that has intrinsic value, and it's really interesting. So I'm going to kind of break down Boston and Ardsmuir separately, even though they ran back and forth throughout the episode, because lots of people are doing recaps and straight up reviews. That is not what I want to do here. I want to look at the things that really spoke to me as a viewer and as somebody who's a longtime reader, and I'm trying desperately to separate my foreknowledge. Now, the foreknowledge is only a framework. It's not a guarantee. And it's difficult sometimes for me, as somebody who has been reading this material for so many decades, that do I see more in what the characters are doing? Am I inferring more from my own experience with the literature? So that brings me to the question, if you're a listener, but you are not a book reader, I really want to hear from you, because I want to know what dimension you're getting. I want to know what subtleties you're seeing or not seeing. That would really help me in how I approach the podcast. That's why the offer's there for if somebody wants to come and co-host with me. I would love to have someone who's hasn't read the material to come and co-host a few episodes, because I think it would give a point of view that would be important and distinct as we move into the depth of these characters and as we move into the books that are bigger and bigger and have so much more going on than the first 2. I am curious. Does it feel too fast or too surfacey, or is it just about right? Do you feel like you have a good handle on these characters and the circumstances that are going on? I would love to hear from you. You can email contact@adramofoutlander.com. You can call into the listener line at 719-425-9444 and leave a message for me. You can comment on the show thread that's on the Facebook group, A Dram of Outlander, or on the Facebook page, A Dram of Outlander, where no matter when you watch, you can comment on there. Yeah, so let me know. I'm infinitely curious, and part of it is sparked because my husband has never read the books. I can't get him to read it, even though he's a big reader, and I have to stop and ask him, what did you think about that? What did that scene mean to you? What was that interplay about? To see if he's picking up on the undertones that I naturally infer being there, just because I have some foreknowledge and I, believe I know these characters pretty darn well at this point. All right. So I don't know about the rest of you, but as I sat and the previews from the last show came up, I just was clapping and I was way too excited for my husband. He was like, oh my gosh, can you simmer down? Since we're watching on demand, it's late at night. And it's funny to see his reaction. He was wincing at my excitement. Because I'm murmuring to myself, oh my gosh, we get to meet Lord John and we're at Ardsmuir and is Murtagh here and what's happening? And the previews about Claire and Frank's disconnection and how they were at loggerheads, I was trying to figure out what that was about exactly. And I had a thought in my mind when that picture that still came out of Claire standing and having a look on her face that was pretty horrendous. And I was guessing that there was a woman on the other side of the door. And I was right. I didn't win anything except satisfaction. But yeah, it really struck me, the emotion that just in that one still. So the title card on this episode is of the dog and of a birthday party table. Interestingly, we never meet the dog in the episode. So I have no idea why the dog was important, unless that was looking like everything is a happy family and they're cohesive and normal, but just wait. It's something that I should tweet to the writers. I have several questions that I'm curious about in this episode, the whys and the hows. And we enter into this episode in Boston in 1956. And I think I'll stay with Boston for the first part of the podcast and just move through that and how these characters interplayed. And then I'll move to Ardsmuir. Again, not doing a straight up review. I just kind of want to look at what's happened between these characters. So they seem fairly relaxed with each other, Claire and Frank. They're having breakfast in their little kitchen, which for the rest of the house being so big, that kitchen is so small in Boston. And Frank is making a full English breakfast. And all I could think was, Leggo my Eggo! Because he wanted to do that because Bree was asking for Eggo waffles. I mean, Bree's an American. She has 2 English parents, but she's definitely an American. And, Claire made some comment about, him trying to feed the American out of her. Claire was being generous of spirit and she was enjoying the breakfast. And this is when she was still in medical school. And Bree's fairly young still. And Claire invites Frank out to the movies. I know around my house we have date night or date day or whenever we can. So she was feeling connected to him and asked him out. And Frank said he'd been to see both of those movies already. And then pauses and looks at her and she gets it. And this is where we see really how cracked their relationship is, how separate it is for sure. I mean, we left the last episode with him confronting her about not opening her eyes when they were intimate, and that she was always thinking about Jamie when they were having sex. So now we can really see what that divide and that gap looks like. And he has a mistress, and he said it was Claire's idea for them to live separately, and basically he's been taking advantage of it, but he's discreet. Okay, so this is 1956 now. Wow. And Claire, it takes her a second. And then she has to shake herself out of her shock. And she said, it's okay. It's fine. It's like she's been living in her own little bubble. She's been going to medical school and doing all of those things, and she's really steeped into her own world. And Frank apparently has been doing a really good job of being discreet. But he has needs and has his own life. But you can see under that, in the way, his tone, that he's not happy having to have a separate life. And that builds in this episode, that idea of making a willing decision, choosing a pathway. It doesn't mean one is comfortable with it. It doesn't mean it's what you really want. It doesn't mean it feels good. But yet, this is what you've chosen, and this is what you decide to do, and you're staying, even when it's less than optimal. And on the outside, it looks really companionable, and it might be most days. But then the cracks show. And that's what we see here. So it sort of knocks Claire down a peg and out of her bubble, and brings her into the reality of the situation. And it shows that Frank has needs and desires. But I don't think he ever would have gone outside the marriage unless Claire chose it. Because she couldn't be his wife, she told him essentially. That's a hard pill. So hard. And Bree comes in for breakfast, right? And she has no idea anything's going on. We don't see her in much detail. So there's a little time jump of 2 years in Boston. And it's Claire's graduation party. And Joe is there as well. We don't see Joe's family, if he has one. So I kind of presume that he had a graduation party. No, she's having a graduation party. But even though we don't get detail about Claire and Joe's relationship, it's apparent that they are bonded and close friends. That's what the body language would say, how they're talking to each other in proximity to everybody else in the room. And Brianna is taking photographs with her nice fancy camera, and she's little. She's like 8 years old. Somewhere in there. Maybe 10. It's hard to tell, except when you're putting all the timelines together with when she turns 18 later on in the episode. And she takes a picture of Claire and Joe holding up their diplomas, and then she wants to take a picture of Mommy and Daddy, and she does, and Frank is unimpressed. It could be a new unimpressed meme. And he seems unsettled. Well, this is really interesting what happens here, because it's so in your face that I'm a little bit surprised by how hard this is hammered home. Because we learned in the first scene with them that he is dating. He's out there having discreet relationship, whether it's one person or many, we have no idea. But it doesn't seem that Claire is doing that. Her relationship is with medical school. And so now she's Dr. Randall. And Frank is trying to hurry the party along because they're supposed to be going to a restaurant. And there's like a ton of people in their house. A bunch of colleagues probably and schoolmates of hers. And the doorbell rings. And he's looking antsy before this. And Brianna's upset that he's not going to dinner with him. He says he has to work. Okay. So Claire goes to the door and she's had a few drinks and she's really happy and she's excited about graduating. And she opens the door and there's a woman on the other side. And at first she doesn't even think about it. Takes her a minute to hit reality. And she realizes this woman's there for Frank and he's seeing her. But it gets better. This is the part that's so shocking. Claire and Frank pass. Frank sent Bree to go play. And Claire has to instantly decide what to do. And she tells all her guests that, hey, let's go to the restaurant early. And if they can't seat us, well, then we'll just go have fun in the bar. So she's quickly thinking and trying to adjust to the circumstance, even though she's clearly very unhappy. Now, I don't really care what their situation is and what they've agreed on. Having somebody come to the house to pick him up, wow, that is like disrespectful, showing his anger, and that's really frankly using the woman he's seeing in a really ill manner. Like he's using her to make a point when it has nothing to do with her. It has to do with Frank and Claire, right? That's tough. And this poor woman is standing there when she recognizes what's going on. And then she comes into the house with Frank as Claire is ushering everyone out. That baffles the hell out of me. Wouldn't she go out to her car? Wouldn't she go wait for Frank and be as unobtrusive as possible? So the fact that he brought her into their home, over the threshold of their home, whoa, Nelly. That seemed mean to me. It seemed cruel. Cruel in a way that I think Claire was portrayed in using Frank for sex. Lashing out. Being selfish. So what would be Frank's motivation here? And I'm thinking that he's very hurt. And he's trying to make a point. And yeah, he might be trying to ruin Claire's big day because he didn't want her really to become a doctor even though he supported it. Like, what else is he going to do? And that he was trying to poke at her. Poke at that bear. Oh. It's really distressing. And Joe sees this whole thing. I'm hoping we see more background between Claire and Joe, that there's flashbacks or something to actually show the creation and growth of their relationship and what they mean to each other. So in Claire and Frank's storyline in this episode, he returns home and he seems completely inebriated. And he has this underlying anger. Is it the best time to be having a conversation when you have two angry people who've been drinking a lot? No. And at this point have had 10 years of frustration-ish with each other? Sounds like a recipe for disaster. But Claire is sitting up waiting for him, of course. I know I would totally be sitting up waiting and asking, what the hell was that? And why would you pick this day to do that? Were you trying to poke at me? Were you trying to hurt me? And she's humiliated. And he throws it back at her that it was her idea that they have separate lives. And when Claire calls his girlfriend, his mistress, a harlot, he defends her alphabet soup and that she's a PhD and how smart she is. She's not a harlot. You know, he has to go in defense of her. Does he really love this other woman, or does he still love Claire? Is he in a state of being unrequited with her? I kind of get the sense that he's still in love with Claire, that he still wishes he could have what the promises were before she went through the stones. And that he would still prefer that. And at some point in this conversation, though, because he thinks she's acting jealous, and he says, "Green ain't your color, Claire." Is she jealous, or is she embarrassed? I think she lives in her own little world, and it surprises her that he actually is acting upon this whole separate life, and he is living an entire life without her. And it does surprise her. And Claire never takes off Frank's ring, just like she never took off Jamie's. To her, even though she's this trailblazer and she does all these things that seem countercultural, Claire is very traditional in relationships. She really is. When she's with someone, she is with them, and sexually she's very open and she's secure in that, but she's very prudish outside of that. So when it comes to how she looks at a relationship, I think is possessive, and she's got more traditional thoughts about it. And even if it was her idea for them to live their own lives, she doesn't want to see it. She doesn't want to know about it. And the fact that it's intruding upon her reality might make her a little bit jealous. Even though she knows that she couldn't love him or give him what he wanted in the way he needed it. It's really tragic for both of them. He admits that he may have wanted to hurt her. And Claire asks if he had slept with his girlfriend in their bedroom. And interestingly, what really diffuses this argument from getting worse than it is Frank says that the bedroom's already too crowded. He's talking about Jamie being in their bedroom with them, that he doesn't need to bring anybody else in there. There's too many there already. And that really stops Claire, because she knows he's right. And it brings her back down to the grounding that she can't be or won't be what Frank needs. And she doesn't love him in the way that he wants. I like that part very much. And Claire offers him divorce again, so he can be free. And we learn that Jerry divorced Millie. And we also learn that Frank's entire reason for staying is for Bree. It's so he can be a hands-on dad. And especially in that era, women always got 100% custody. But it's still a choice for a man to come around and see the children or child. And his point was that Jerry doesn't get to see his kids. Well, Jerry could, probably, if Millie wasn't being mean about it. And Claire says she would never keep Brianna from him. And then he passionately tells her that she hasn't kept her promises, so why would he trust that now? What promise was that she didn't keep? She promised to raise the child with him and not to talk about Jamie. So by the letter of the law, or the letter of the agreement, she's done that. But what he wanted was her to be his wife again, lock, stock, and barrel, and she hasn't been able to. And she sees that it really hurts him. She doesn't really want to hurt him. And she also does not like being shocked out of her bubble of existence. So we see a flash forward about 8 years to Brianna's birthday. Ish. We don't really have a timeline, but we get that happy birthday together. I'm wondering if she was 16 in that little scene, because Claire says, don't expect a car, and Frank undermines her and says, we'll see about it. So clearly their relationship has not improved. That's what that little scene meant. So we finally end up in 1966 Boston. And it's Bree's graduation from high school. It looks like she's 18 years old, and she looks for her parents. And Claire is beaming for her daughter, and we hear Frank say, "There's my girl." And when we see Frank and Claire next, we've seen this thread of their discontent in how they've had this facade. And in Claire's mind, it's been much better than apparently it has been. In her mind, it's worked great. She's been a doctor for 10 years now. It's all wonderful, right? She could live in her own head and have Jamie in her head as much as she wants. She's successful. She's got a daughter. She has a nice home. She has a great practice as a surgeon at the hospital. Like, things are working out for Claire. The best they can be. That's what she's really tried to do. And a thing that I find really interesting is she wears white in every scene except for when she's wearing her scrubs. Is that hearkening to her being the White Witch and the healer? I love that. It seems like a really good nod. But she has white on throughout this entire episode, at least on top. So she's sitting in a chair, and she looks like she's lost in thought, and Frank comes in. And he starts out this nice conversation. It seems like he's interested in what's going on with her, and talks about her day a little bit, and he seems really supportive. And then he drops this huge bomb on her that he wants to take Brianna to England. And Claire's like, great, how long are you going to be gone? Again, living in her own bubble. Brianna's 18 now. She's an adult. And he says he's been offered a job at Cambridge. And Claire assumes he means for all of them to go. And she says she can't leave. She can't leave the hospital or Boston right now. And he doesn't want her to come with them. He wants a divorce so he can get remarried to Sandy. And Claire is completely caught off guard and unaware. This shows how much they have not communicated, how they really do stay out of each other's lives, and they only co-parent together as best as possible. They do the things that they're supposed to do as a couple and show up at functions, but they don't communicate at all outside certain boundaries. So Claire is completely caught. And she gets very angry, as Claire is wont to do, and accuses him of just biding his time. And in this scene, Frank reminds me of how many wives that I've known, how many women I've known who've just counted the days until all their children are grown so they can file for divorce. They've been unhappy in their marriage for years and years. And now they see it as their time to be free. Now they can live the rest of their life because they've done their job in raising their children and giving them the best that they could with what they had. That's what this seems like for Frank. Like he's been the jilted wife. And he wants somebody to love him, who really just loves him And it's so desperate when he asked Claire if she hadn't had that constant reminder of a child who reminded her of Jamie every time she looked at her. Would time have been enough for her to forget about him and come back? Like, he still really wants to know. He still wants Claire. He doesn't really want this other woman. He still wants her. And it's so sad. And it's so tragic. He probably loves the other woman, but it's not what he knows he could have with Claire, or what he's experienced with her. And Claire said there couldn't be enough time for that to ever happen. Oh, that's amazing. Now, I find it interesting that Brianna would be of age and them have this conversation, because she could choose to go to university anywhere. Like, why wouldn't this have happened when she was still 17, when taking her would make sense? Because now, and as Frank even said, Bree's an adult and can make her own decisions, so I'm a little confused by that context. Felt a little chunky to me and didn't really flow well, because Brianna could go anywhere. She is a daddy's girl, so he could take her, and he has a lot of pull still at Oxford, he said, and could get her in there. But that's interesting to me. It's a weird dynamic. Like, why bring her up and then she's old enough not to go with him because she's actually of an adult age? I'm a little confused by that. But this is so sad to me. And at the end of this, again, it's diffused by the reminder of Jamie, and that he's always been on Claire's side, like with her this whole time. And Frank just wants to be loved and cared for, and wants to be able to love somebody. Well, he deserves that, right? I think so. And again, highlights how you can make decisions, purposely make them. But it's more of the least evil, the least bad decision versus making the best decision. Like, he made a decision so he could father a child, and knowing what the circumstances were. It wasn't for Claire at all. It was so he could be a father. And he couldn't father any other children, so this was his lot and circumstance that he chose. But it never altered the fact that he wanted his wife back, not just in name or body. He wanted Claire, mind, body, and soul back, and he couldn't have that. So he was a good father. Yep. And then he said, I'm done. I'm over. Psh, I'm out. And he grabs his keys and heads out the door. And then Claire gets a call and has to go to the hospital. So I'm like, well, they got 2 cars, right? And we see her having come out of surgery for who she was called for and comforting a patient. And Joe comes in and says that Frank's been in an accident. And Claire runs. And I don't know if this was supposed to be an emergency department bay or what, but she goes into a room that doesn't look like the morgue. And Frank is on a slab. He's dead. And we don't get the details of the accident. Maybe that will come in flashback. I don't know. But Claire says goodbye to him. She doesn't take off her wedding ring. And she's really moved. And, you know, when she says, I don't know if you're close enough to hear, like his soul is still nearby, that she loved him very much. And that he was her first love. And she kisses him. And that tear that runs out of her eye across his face, I was like, I mean, that was super moving. And it's really sad that her debts were paid in all this, and she was freed by Frank's death. Now, he would have divorced her, and that would have been a different kind of freedom. But Frank never got to secure his. He paid the debt, but he's dead. That's a pretty rough ending for Frank. Then again, this is Tobias's last episode. So when the show airs, people are going to be using the hashtag eyes open for Tobias as a way of saying thank you and as a send-off to him. And even though you'll be listening after the show has aired, still tweet him something wonderful about how his portrayal of Frank and Blackjack really, what it meant to you. I think that'd be great to do that on Twitter. That's where he mainly is. I don't think he has a Facebook page or is anywhere else. But, wow. Now we see what happened and how Claire gained her freedom. And it's bittersweet for her. But now she can come out of her bubble and actually live, right? Whatever that looks like. And what we saw at the end of season 2 was her looking for Jamie. And we look at the preview for the next episode, and it looks like they find him in history. So she's moving forward. And now is she going to dare to live? Like we know, but this is what's going on with her. She has decisions to make. She doesn't have to live in those confines and within that promise of not talking about Jamie, of keeping everything within herself and putting up the facade, right? So now we get to explore so much more. I really liked the dynamic between Frank and Claire. It was shocking to me to see the adultery dead in your face. I was shocked to see Frank so raw and acting not English, stiff upper lip and all, and to have so much emotion and to be so free with it. So maybe living in America for 20 years played on him as well. And we saw very little of Brianna. We just saw it as milestones in their life, but we saw the tension in their relationship and really what it was made of and what the purpose of it was. And that purpose is now fulfilled. And I hope through Brianna's eyes we get to see more or hear more about her relationship with Frank and what he meant to her as her daddy. Since that was his purpose, I hope so. And will Claire keep his ring on into her future? It's going to be interesting to see if that happens. So we're almost 40 minutes in, and I haven't even talked about Ardsmuir yet, so let's go there. So now that we've seen Claire's life and Frank's life and how all of that has been put to rest for Claire, we need to see what happened to Jamie and what that looks like. So they are at Ardsmuir prison, and the leaving governor cannot escape fast enough. His name is Colonel Quarry. We get his name later on in the episode, but that's who it is. And anybody who gets sent there basically is an exile from regular British soldiering. You had to have done something pretty wrong or scandalous to get sent to northwestern Scotland. Now, the filming location is not in northwest Scotland, but that's where it's supposed to be, where they have just the moors and there's no food, hardly, you could escape and you can't get anywhere, you would die and you would be easily found. So Quarry is walking Major John Gray, who we met back in, way back when, as the boy right before, near Kerry Eric, who came to defend Claire's honor. And Jamie broke his arm. And then there was that family debt that Hal paid off when he didn't kill Jamie after Culloden and send him back to Lollybrock. So, Lord John is no longer 16 years old. He's a grown man. And he must have done something or had a terrible scandal to get sent to Ardsmuir as its new governor. So he's there, Quarry's showing him around, and they're talking about the bad weather and the bad social scene. Yeah, I don't think Ardsmuir is like hopping high Scottish society. And all the prisoners, and that they're mostly Highland Jacobites, and except for one major player, which is that of Red Jamie. And he's in manacles. He's shackled. And Jamie's been there for 3 years at this point. And as they walk into the courtyard where a bunch of prisoners are, John gets his first sight of Jamie. And you're going to see the complexity of this character, as well as the fact that he's a little more spontaneous. And he reminds me of Claire a lot, in some ways, where he's thoughtful and he's really smart, but then he just is impetuous and acts a little bit freely. Is that immaturity? Is that lack of caution meaningful? I guess we'll have to get to know his character a little bit better. I'm not sure. So he sees Jamie, and he's been carrying that shame of that broken arm, of what the Jacobites were able to do to the English camp at being found tied up by the other soldiers. So he's been carrying this for years. And so he's horrified, and he hopes that Jamie does not recognize him, because he was a teenager, now he's an adult, and he looks quite different. A couple of the points that Harry Quarry brings up as he's leaving is the French gold that is thought to be sent from Louis to the Jacobites. There's always that rumor mill flying around. And that he had dinners with Red Jamie every week because the other Jacobites regard Jamie as their chieftain. They call him McDoo, which means son of the Black One. His father was Black Brian, as he was dark-haired. Okay, so those are the key tidbits that Quarry leaves John with. That Jamie is in irons because he's unpredictable. Like, don't trust him. He's worthy, and he acts as their emissary for the other men, but don't turn your back, because he'll kill you. And every time we see Jamie, he just looks menacing, and he's dirty. Even though his hair keeps getting cut somehow, and he only has a few days stubble, he's filthy. And it's so horrendous to look at his hands. They're bruised, and his wrists have open sores from the irons. So Jamie goes back in, and the other men ask if he's seen the new governor, and he says he's young, but he's straight-backed, and he has a good countenance about him. So the respect for this governor is already building within Jamie. Like, he can see that he's a man of carriage, right? And he looks really familiar to Jamie, and he's trying to figure out who it is. How does he know him? And then, this is the part that everybody screams who's read the books. Murtagh Fitzgibbons is in the cell. He looks like hell. He's coughing. He's been bitten by a rat. And then Jamie pulls out his herbal medicine knowledge that Claire left with him. He wants to put milk thistle, crush it all up, make a poultice or a salve out of it, and put it on Murtagh's wound in order to keep it from festering. So Murtagh was picked up somewhere. We don't know the backstory after Claude and what happened to him, but he's alive. Yay, Murtagh! Woo! Jamie won't say Claire's name. He just says, from a lass who was a healer. And Murtagh's just looking at him. Murtagh loved Claire. He ended up with a special relationship with her. We see the very first meeting of John as the governor and Jamie as the Highlanders' chieftain. And Jamie's brought to him, as well as John's dinner. And John formally introduces himself. But he doesn't say we've met before. Neither does Jamie. They both conveniently leave that out. Do you think Jamie remembers him yet? So he's offering the weekly meetings that Jamie had had with Colonel Quarry. But he doesn't name the prior governor yet. And then he sees a rat coming across the floor and yells at it because the rat wants his dinner, and he demands a cat for his room. And then asks about rats among the men and says that all the cells should have a cat. And Jamie speaks up and says the men wouldn't like it very much. And he infers that they're eating them for food, and when John finds this out, he's mortified that there aren't enough provisions for the men to eat. John might be classist and English upper crusty, but he's also very much a humanitarian in a lot of ways. He doesn't like to treat people like objects, even when he has to. It hurts him to do so. He's a soldier to his core, but he's also very fair and just and honorable. And he's pretty horrified with the understanding about the rats being food. And Jamie leans into him in a completely menacing way and says, God knows what you've done to be sent here, but for your own sake, I hope you deserved it. Like, got dead in his face, and Lord John is just, whoa. I can't believe that just happened. And then Jamie leaves. David Barry is going to be a great John Grey. He has the ability, similar to Tobias Menzies, to shift his face slightly in order to make a point. Because there's really not a whole lot of dialogue in Ardsmuir, and much of what we're getting is from their body language and the faces they're making. But he's left confounded and a bit taken aback. We meet a new character, and his name is Duncan Kerr, and he's very ill, and he's a raving madman who speaks little English, but does speak Gaelic and French. Well, who else speaks Gaelic and French? And a wee bit of English? Well, a lot of English. Jamie. So he's pressed into service by Gray to translate because this man was talking about gold when he was picked up by soldiers and brought back to Ardsmuir. Well, Jamie declines at first, and it's pretty funny because he's asserting his authority or whatever authoritative presence he has back upon Gray. And he does this in a way that is to promote his men or to promote something that he wants. Like he's good at this. He's good at negotiation, even if someone doesn't know they're being negotiated with. So John makes him an offer he can't refuse and says if he helps him, he'll strike off the irons because he's been wearing them for so many years. And then Jamie's request ultimately is that Murtagh gets medical attention and a blanket because he's not doing well in prison. And John just wants Jamie to only tell him what he learns from this man, only to report to him and nobody else, and that he has to tell the truth. But it's really funny when Jamie tries to beg off his offer at first. He says, I'm a prisoner, not an interpreter. That reminds me of something Bones would have said to Captain Kirk damn it, I'm a doctor, Jim. I'm not an interpreter. I know, it's a funny line. I love that line. So they come up with an agreement, and time is moving at Ardsmuir. This isn't all just in a week. It's moving, and time is passing. So we're looking at months, possibly a couple of years in this episode that has transpired. They're not time jumping as much as Frank and Claire did to Frank's untimely death. However, they're still moving forward over much time. And so Jamie and John are building a relationship of sorts, a friendship. They're building some respect and more honesty as they go. But this is really part of the beginning of that trust, that Jamie will follow the terms of the agreement. Now, Jamie is one who's really big into semantics, and he says exactly what he means. You cannot add anything to it at all. Like if he says his wife is gone, he means she's gone. He doesn't mean she's dead. Oh, and the one thing I forgot when it came to Murtagh is that he had a piece of tartan in his hands. And there was a big penalty for having that under the laws of proscription. That you couldn't have tartan, couldn't wear a kilt, couldn't speak Gaelic. They spoke Gaelic because they didn't know English, but they couldn't do many things from their Highland culture anymore. And Jamie made him put it away, just like he made Fergus put away that gun, or he thought he did. So Jamie's trying to live up to the ends of the law properly. He's not looking for trouble. He just wants to get by. So when Jamie talks to Duncan Kerr in multiple languages, he finds out that Duncan is raving about this gold. And he mentions some things in various languages, in Gaelic and French, about a white witch and about Jamie's family and about the gold being cursed. And it's a lot of little information, but Jamie knows what he means. And the man dies. And it does make me wonder if in all of this, because he talks about the Mackenzie being dead, Colum's dead, so is Dougal, so is Ellen, Jamie's mother, if he's actually talking about a different witch, if he's talking about Gaelis Duncan, who will come for him? I don't know. But Jamie thinks it could possibly be Claire, but he doesn't tell this to John. That information he keeps to himself because it's not pertinent to what John needs. And he gives the information in basic, and John doesn't believe him and thinks he's holding back. Well, duh, he is. But he follows the letter of the agreement and tells him what he says. But John's not satisfied at all. But Jamie does discuss it with Murtagh. And Murtagh wonders if, after all this time, Claire is there, if she didn't go back. And Jamie's got to find out. Jamie won't even use her name, but Murtagh asks if he can pray for her and the bairn. I wonder why Jamie's not praying. He's Catholic. He has a prayer for everything. But that's an interesting question for the writers, why he's not praying for her. So time is marching. And as Governor John has Jamie come to his quarters and offers dinner like he had with Colonel Quarry, And Jamie's pretty salty, man. He is just not having it. His attitude is like, out of 100 is 100. He's still just angry. But Lord John assures him it's to forge a connection, not loosen Jamie's tongue to tell him anything more. So Jamie agrees. Well, John's probably trying to do this in order to get more information out of Jamie eventually, right? Because he has a long game. We don't know how long they're going to be at this prison. And Jamie starts the act of negotiating for the men and asks if they will be allowed to hunt by putting snares out for animals when they're cutting the peat. And then the men can keep the meat as well as being allowed to harvest greens such as watercress in order to prevent scurvy. And John is horrified by them wanting to eat greens, and he said his wife told him when John's in disbelief that greens could help with scurvy. And he's surprised that Jamie's married. Now you see, he didn't know that the woman near Kerr was Jamie's wife. He still doesn't know that. And Jamie sits down after John says he will take that proposal into consideration so the men can get more food, that he agrees to sit down and have dinner with him. Now, the English believe themselves superior to Scots. Read history, it's always there. And so they sit down to eat, and they're having pheasant, and Jamie takes a bite and names the sauce. And John is surprised, like, whoa, that Jamie has this awesome culinary palate, right? And he doesn't know the name of the sauce at all, and Jamie smiles. This is really the first time we've seen Jamie smile. We haven't seen him smile at all. And so what is Jamie working on? Like, he's calculating something in his head, it seems like. And he also knows that he can show, even in his grubby prisoner traitor status, that he is a man of knowledge. He is a man of true status in the world, that he is equal to or above John. And Jamie would be equivalent to John's brother Hal, the firstborn, in the social strata. And John is the secondborn. And even though Jamie was a second son, he was elevated to first son because his brother died. So Jamie and Hal, Lord Melton, are on equal page. And so he's actually slightly above John when you look at education, look at status, look at the hierarchy. And I think this plays to that just a bit. And when Jamie goes back to the cell, the men want him to storytell and talk about the dinner and name every bite of food because they don't get it. But because he's considered their chieftain, they want him to be taken care of, because if he gets a meal, they're going to be better taken care of. If he's well in with the governor, they're going to be getting more. He's in an honored position. And the irons have stayed off of Jamie at this point. So he and John are working on this relationship, and they're building something. Even though it looks really tenuous, they're building something. It's a foundation. Now, Jamie hasn't said or indicated that he knows who John is and that he remembers him as a teenager. And John hasn't said anything. So, So we see the men. Obviously, John had allowed them to have traps, and they're going out onto the moor with a bunch of soldiers. And a couple of the men run over to the snares to see if there's food, and one found a wascally wabbit. And while that happened and everybody's attention was to the snares, Jamie runs and hides, and somebody covers him up with some loose peat. He's escaped. And all we know is that he was last seen by Seal Island. That we see soldiers talking, Gray and another man. And he likely didn't survive or he's not coming back. And John is really angry. 3 days had gone by. They haven't found him. And they're going to have to go back to Ardsmuir after this one night. So John is relieving himself in the courtyard. He's peeing. And Jamie grabs him from behind and pulls him up against the wall. And he says his name, who he is. This completely startles John. And Jamie recounts when they actually met. And we see the flashbacks of that whole scene when John was a teenager. And Jamie still doesn't say that the woman was his wife. But at the end of this, even though Jamie's had John's sword in his hand, and asked John why he didn't remind him who he was and about their experience together, John was like, it's obvious. I mean, he was embarrassed. It was horrible. And so Jamie says, you didn't fulfill your promise, because he'd promised to kill him if he saw him again. And so he kneels down as he puts the sword in the ground for John to be able to, behead him. And John refuses, saying he doesn't kill unarmed prisoners. And the look on Jamie's face, he wanted to die that day. He'd hoped he could anger him and rile him so much that he would kill him on the spot. Because Claire wasn't at Seal's Island, or the Silky's Island, whichever you want to call it. There was no evidence of her. And he now had nothing to live for again. He just wanted to die. And it was so tragic to see the look on his face. We don't know exactly how long it was. He and John are walking on the moor after, and he decides to tell him why he escaped, essentially. That though he told him everything pertinent to him, what Duncan had said, that Duncan had said things to him that he understood and that were important to him personally. And he discusses Claire. And I found interesting in the shots here that when John would be speaking, he looked above Jamie. And when Jamie would be speaking, he looked like he was above John. I thought that was really neat. A good directorial shot. And Jamie says, no gold was ever sent by King Louis. It never came. And then he shows him the sapphire that he found, and he said he was holding on to it in case he ever got free. And all I could think of is there's a scene in Pulp Fiction where Christopher Walken presents a child a pocket watch. And he says that he kept his pocket watch up his ass for 2 years just to make sure he could bring it home from Vietnam. I mean, that's... My husband and I both said that when we watched this scene. It just made us crack up. So Jamie came clean. He confessed overall why he was there. So more trust building. We see Murtagh get doctoring, and he's healing over many, many months. And we see another dinner, and John and Jamie are playing chess, and they're just talking. And they've gotten very comfortable with each other. So you can tell that much time had to have elapsed. And they start discussing the losses from Culloden. And John gets really introspective and very personal and intimate, and talks about how he had a very special friend that he lost at Culloden, and he was dying, and Hal made him go away from it so he could never have a proper goodbye, and that his brother Hal said it would get better in time, but some grief never goes away. And it's obvious that this person meant a lot to John. He's tipping his hand a little bit here. And he asks Jamie if his life is really burdensome. And Jamie takes pretty much a glass half full perspective with him. And we're getting to see the transition of Jamie from being this desolate ghost of himself to reconnecting with his purpose of taking care of these men, because Murtagh's better now, and making sure these prisoners have a better quality of life under this governor. And he's seeing it, even without Claire, even though it's hard and that grief never goes away, that it's really all in your perspective and your vantage point on what you do with it. And it's obvious they've both had this serious loss, and Jamie talks about his wife Claire, and he smiles talking about her. And then, this is hilarious, he finally totally comes clean to John and says that the woman that he was trying to save from the Scots that night when they first met was actually his wife. And John can't even believe it. He's shocked. Because he says, I meant to thank you for the kindness you did to my wife. Because it didn't matter if she was really in danger or not. Jamie says, ultimately, that John acted in the way he should have if he thought she was really in danger. And that Jamie says he's thought of it often, right? And again, they're building layers, and they're both disclosing a little bit more. And John realizes how much Jamie loved his wife, how much she means to him still, even though she's gone. And he reaches over to touch Jamie's hand and tell him how sorry he is for his loss. But he holds on just a little too long, and he rubs his hand, and there's this pause, and you're like, oh man, dragon's gonna bite. Back off, John. Don't stroke the bear. And Jamie quickly realizes that there was more to John's loss, and that he was telling him that it was somebody he loved, a lover that he lost at Culloden. And John was showing his interest in Jamie. Okay, number one, you never hit on a prisoner. Authority gap, like, you don't do that. But John had removed himself from being governor, and he was relating to Jamie as a man, as a human, as somebody who lost something. He was not thinking about his position. And that shows a little bit of immaturity, a little bit. But he had gotten lost in this conversation and in this personal connection that he'd made with Jamie. And it's so chilling when Jamie says, take your hand off me or I will kill you. And I love the slowness and the stillness of this part, where you see Jamie's face. And there's so much in it. Well, John doesn't know that he was tortured and raped by a sadistic blackjack Randall. But that doesn't really matter. He shouldn't have been coming on to a prisoner. That's it. Done, right? He shouldn't have been. He didn't mean to. He just let himself get lost in the moment. But when Jamie got up to leave and John had tears going down his face, it was so crushing, because not only did he share something and this beautiful moment got broken, he could see that the relationship he had built with Jamie might be broken, and that he'd shared his secret, that he was a homosexual man. People could be put to death back then for that. So there's lots of things going on, because he showed his cards, and now Jamie has a secret. I love the humanity brought to John. I love how, even though he lost his sense of propriety, that it was over that personal connection and need. It's a beautiful scene. I think really well done. And not done in an alarming way. And not done in a everybody hates gay guys sort of way. It was done so delicately. And I think just beautiful. Thank you, Matt Roberts. You're just honoring this stuff so well. So, as we've seen the time lapse at Ardsmuir prison, the finality of it is that the prison is closing. and everybody except Jamie is being transported, including Murtagh, over to the colonies, and they will have 14 years of servitude, indentured. 14. How old are a lot of these men going to be? That is incredible. And we know in history we're not too far from the American Revolution, though. I mean, the English didn't know that. It took them a long time to get a grip after there was an independent government in the United States. So, it was a journey. Jamie, though, is taken out of the group, and hands are tied, and he's behind Grey's horse. And he's walking behind this horse. Now, they're supposed to be northwest Scotland. And 3 days, they're supposed to arrive in northwest England with Jamie not even on a horse, but walking behind John's horse. So, I'm just saying, that's a little bit of Doctor Who timey-wimey stuff right there. It would take a lot longer than 3 days to slowly walk a horse and a prisoner behind it to get from the north of Scotland to the north of England. Just saying. So they end up at a place called Hellwater, which is in the Lake District of England. That was not pointed out. I'm just throwing that in. And hey, it could be anywhere. So we see this lovely yearning between Murtagh and Jamie of being very worried about each other as Jamie is getting walked off in one direction and the rest of the prisoners are getting taken in another direction. And so hopefully we'll see Murtagh later, next season. Somewhere. Maybe we'll see him again. Hopefully he doesn't die on the trip over after surviving Culloden. So we get to really see another kind of point in the relationship between John Grey and Jamie Fraser, where Jamie asks why he was kept aside. It's because he's a traitor, and only by royal decree can he be free, even under indenture. And the king doesn't feel like doing that right now, so this is the best John could do. So what John has done is he's secured a location for Jamie to live out his parole until the king decides to set him free. Like, how long is enough? So he's going to be working in the service of somebody named Lord Dunsany at a place called Hellwater. That's their estate. But they don't really like Jacobites or Stuart or the cause. John did not say why, but the Dunsanys really don't like it. So he suggests that Jamie use an alternative name. And he unties Jamie's hands or takes off the cuffs. And Jamie asks him why. He says, I didn't let you have your way, essentially. I didn't sleep with you, so why are you doing this, telling me this and being kind to me? And it was John's personal honor. He's given Jamie an opportunity at some kind of life, even though he's still a prisoner. He will have some freedom. He can live some modicum of life. And that's what John can do. Basically, his life was given to him by Jamie that day, and now he's given Jamie his life. Even though the family debt was discharged, John is now discharging the rest of the debt, because he needs to do it for himself. And they did share something very personal. They shared intimacies in those meetings and those dinners, and John as being honorable and respectful of what they know of each other. So I think that was, again, very delicately handled and beautifully done. And John does say that he regrets his behavior, basically hitting on Jamie. So we can see really what John is made of and how much he's grown in this process. And we see how much Jamie has come back into his own in that his purpose in life. He's not the walking dead anymore. And their relationship is vital to the stories that come after this episode. And it matters. And we get to see that. And even though there's that class fight, even though there's the fight that he's a prisoner and John is free and he has status with his English heritage and he's a lord and he has money and he's a man of means and he holds Jamie's parole. So he's responsible for Jamie. But they've also come to this not conditional way of friendship, but they can see each other for who they really are in their relationship. And that is a rare thing, especially for John. I look forward to see how this develops and where it's going. I think it was so good. Like, I felt very compact again. I felt fast. And again, I want to hear what you have to say if you haven't read the books and what things are surprising to you and what I've said, or were you able to pick up on all the layers of things that a reader would naturally see in this? And I try to keep them apart, but it does beg my curiosity. What do you see versus what I see? And wow, I look forward to the rest of this season, and we have 10 more episodes. It seems like it's going to go by so quickly for us. And I did want to say that we have a winner for the official Mackenzie Tartan lamb's wool scarf, and it's Sherry Young, and I'll be sending it to her tomorrow. She's very excited, so thank you guys for your entries, and I will do my best to come up with some more giveaways for everyone. So, where can you find A Dram of Outlander? Well, Facebook, A Dram of Outlander page. There's also A Dram of Outlander group that you can join. Instagram and Twitter is Dram of Outlander. No A in the front. Tumblr is A Dram of Outlander. The website, of course, is adramofoutlander.com. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, and you can listen directly through the website as well. I look forward to your comments, 719-425-9444, or you can send me an email to contact@adramofoutlander.com, or just leave comments under the post or in the special episode place that I make every week on the Facebook page and group. Or you can leave a comment on YouTube as well. Getting a lot of YouTube listens, which is really fantastic. It's taken off over there. And on YouTube, it's also A Dram of Outlander. So I want to know what you like, what I'm doing, what you want more of, what you want less of. And please go and follow Karen Doherty, Outlander Medicine. She's putting up great posts every single week. And the other ways that you can support the podcast: share the podcast, share the posts, share the pages and social media sites, interact with others on the pages and social media places. Come on Wednesday night and join into the Twitter chat. We use hashtag ADOO, and we talk about the prior week's podcast. So it's this week's episode we'll be talking about in a few days on Wednesday. It's really fun and interesting to see all the different things that people come up with. And hey, I'm a one-woman show. So if you'd like to financially support me and you want to make a one-time offering, send me an email or voicemail, or you can go to patreon.com/adramofoutlander and leave a monthly offering. And I totally appreciate you for listening. The show has grown by leaps and bounds since season 2 started, and I look forward to doing weekly content for you from here on out. I'm in for the long haul. So thank you again for listening, and I appreciate you as always. And until next time, Slán je va.